Hello and welcome to today's episode of Winning Mentality. My name is Daniel Cutright, and man, I'm excited to have joining me today head of University of Lynchburg's men and women's distance programs and cross country, Coach Jake Reed. Jake, how are you, man?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this.
Yeah, Merry late Christmas to you. I know we're recording this right after Christmas, so hopefully you had some good
You
time
too,
with the
man.
fam. Awesome. Well, just to give people a little context before we jump into this conversation here, and I think, we're going to be talking a lot around maybe track and field and cross country, but I think people from all different backgrounds can benefit from this. I want to get into a little bit on what you've been able to do at University of Lynchburg with their cross country and track programs, and give a little context on kind of where the program was when you got there in 2015 when you were hired on. Lynchburg. It's still weird for me to say University of Lynchburg because when I ran there, it was Lynchburg College. But historically, Lynchburg had some success. Multiple conference champs pretty much every year. I know the stretch that I was there from 2008 to 2012, they were on a run of 5 straight cross country ODAC titles. We had never lost outdoor conference title, indoor conference title for the men when I was there. And I don't say that to toot my own horn, but just that's kind of the program that I walked into as well. We had 4 national NCAA appearances for cross country, and the women had some success at the ODAC level. And then the program kind of tapered off a little bit. There was for whatever reason some staffing changes and things that happened where the program kind of backslid. And fast forward 2015, that's where you come in, and it's been just as a kind of an onlooker of the program, a fan of the program, an alumni, watching what's taken place. It's been awesome to see the growth. This past year, you're coming off of an 18th place finish at nationals for boys in cross country. The women made their first NCAA appearance since 1998 as a team. This past outdoor, you had 3 individual All-Americans in boys track, and it's just been awesome to watch the culture and the success, to see where that program has come. And so I wanted to say all that. Hopefully I did it justice to give a little bit of background on the program. You're way more in the weeds than I am, obviously. But hopefully that sets us up well. Talk about, maybe a little bit of your background, where you found yourself coming into 2015. You get hired at Lynchburg. Let's maybe start there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you covered it really well. And I always appreciate coming on with an alum that knows the history of the program. The great coaches that came before us, like Jack Toms, Doug Thomasy, James Goss, that's still coaching now up at Nazareth, that was with Thomasy. And I think back to the legacy that they left, and, stepping in. I know we had fallen on some hard times that you had alluded to. I know our roster size had dwindled down to about 30 some athletes when we walked in, and that was for the entire track team. Fortunately enough, Thomas had done some good recruiting a few years prior and left me with a decent class of junior and senior boys to get it rolling. Girls program wasn't quite where we had hoped. I was just struggling to kind of field a team when I walked in. If we could get 5 runners to the line, I was excited. But stepping in, I knew with the rich history and the new AD that had only been there a year prior to us, John, the huge emphasis he wanted to place on athletics and especially track and field to get us back to where we once were. I knew it was a place we could thrive. Coach Sprecher, the director of the program now, when he brought me on as a distance coach, we came in together. He was my old coach at UNC Wilmington. That's kind of our connection. I had been there for a year and a half before I finished up at Liberty University. We knew that it was going to be a long road. We knew even we were going to be graduating a bunch of juniors and seniors, and we didn't have any freshmen or sophomores. So it was more of this long-term outlook. We knew it wasn't a 1-2 year project. It was going to be 3, 4, 5 years down the road before we got to see what we wanted to come to fruition, and that all had to start with culture. And I'm a huge round, and we needed buy-in. And I think in the beginning when I came in, I know we've talked at length about this, but not only was the team not in a good place numbers wise, but the culture just was not there. It was more of a club recreational sport, play hard, party hard atmosphere. Just was not in a good space for a student athlete to thrive. And we really needed to shift that. So the first few years, it was just about laying that groundwork, trying to find the right athletes to buy in and build that culture around. And, that took some time, but that evolved. And, thankfully I had a couple guys that came in freshman year. I think of Tristan Lucy Spidell, just the impact that he made and just buying in right away, wanting to build that culture, wanting to lay the groundwork for it. Those long conversations in the office. I'm a big advocate for the mental and emotional, even more than the physical, to make sure that we got that in the right place so we can move forward, not just physically, emotionally with the program, and getting the culture in the right space.
That's awesome, man. Now I remember, when you and I first talked and when I started to first get to know you, I was like, this guy, he's definitely had coaching experience at the college level before, just the way that you think about building a team and running. But I mean, talk about your prior experience, before coming to Lynchburg. Were you doing college coaching? I mean, what was that like? Where were you coaching before this?
Yeah, for sure. Me and my wife both ran at Liberty University, and I was fortunate enough. My senior year, I didn't have eligibility left. I got to coach her this last semester of her senior year. That's where I really, found the love and passion for coaching, and that kind of evolved into that following year. I was working at our local running store in town. It's a store that doesn't exist anymore, but it's kind of a startup. And one of our employees that we had hired had asked me to coach this local homeschool team. And, they had about 20 athletes. It was more of a recreational thing, and was like, hey, you interested in getting involved in it? And my wife was on board. Obviously, it's 20 kids. I ain't gonna pay you anything. It's more of just doing it for the love of the sport. And that's a Christian-based homeschool high school program I still run to this day, called the Pacers. We built that program from about 20 athletes to 50. So I already knew what it was like to kind of build something like that. And again, it starts with culture. And I'm a huge faith-based man. My Christian faith, really leads me in developing that culture. The Christian principles and values is kind of what we revolve that around. And I always say, first and foremost, you got to have your priorities in order in life. You got to know what's important to you, and you got to invest in them at a high level. And, I always, coming in, even with the Lynchburg program, with the Pacers program, every year I tell our athletes, don't set your goals based on upon what you want to get out of something. Set your goals based on what you want to put into something. And what I always mean by that is the priorities. Like, what is important to you in life? We know running isn't the most important thing, and it shouldn't be. But at the same time, for one person, it might be their third or fourth priority. For another, it might be their fifth, sixth, seventh. But we need to know that, and I need to know how to coach you. And there needs to be a certain level of commitment, because you're committing to a team and you're committing to a culture that is asking and demanding a certain expectation level and dedication level for you as an individual in order to be a part of it. And that's kind of where we started. And even with that, high school team, I guess it would have been, 4 or 5 years of coaching under my belt. I'd had a Foot Locker finalist. We had a lot of success and pretty good girls teams, but it was my first time coaching college, and I knew it'd be different. So I really leaned on Coach Sprecher those first couple years, especially from just a cultural perspective, from just understanding how to coach collegiate athletes, from how to understand, the administrative part. That's all different at the collegiate level, trying to just learn the ropes and just follow in his footsteps. And I'm thankful for a great mentor to, give me the autonomy to lead an awesome distance program, but also, give me the education and background that I needed to do it successfully.
Yeah. What were some of the biggest differences, like when you think about coaching a high school kid versus coaching a college kid? I mean, it sounds like I would guess that fundamentally, foundationally, from the principles that you're putting into your program, those are probably pretty similar, correct? But I would imagine that, on like an individual basis, like what would you say are some of the nuances? Because I've known other guys that, they try to make that shift from high school to college coaching, or they're thinking about making that shift from high school to college coaching. So yeah, I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think there's positives and negatives to both. When, I transitioned, I think from the high school level, some of the positives, if you got a lot of, especially in the Christian homeschool community, you got a lot of parental support. You got a lot of backing. Their home lives are very structured. You kind of know what's going on. Their parents really, value the principles and values that you are trying to instill in them, and those are being reinforced when they leave practice. Some of the tough side of that, obviously, is running is not a number one priority for a lot of the high school kids, and there's a lot more going on in their life, and their schedules aren't all the same. But when going into the college side of things is, from 4 to 6, you're instilling these principles and values, and you're trying to instill a specific mindset and culture and, buy into your program. But as soon as they leave that, that could be wrecked in the next 4 or 5 hours. That could be wrecked that weekend. And, not everyone shares those same beliefs and values or principles that you might, hold high in that regard. And it's not so much, you're not trying to manipulate an individual, because you want them to be an individual. You want them to have
Right.
ownership. You want them to grow. But you're also trying to show them a path to success. And I used my high school, athletes as success stories. I used that program. I, showed, how those kids live, what their life is like outside of running, what success they've even had outside of running, not just running, and just, showing, hey, if you're willing to live a certain lifestyle, you can have success. Because when I stepped in, culturally, the biggest problem wasn't that they weren't willing to work hard from 4 to 6. It was outside of practice that,
Mm.
tended to wreck what you were trying to do. And I know, a lot of those kids, it's not malicious. It's not like, hey, I'm going to go out and sabotage everything we're doing, coach. It's just not an understanding of how important lifestyle truly is.
Yeah. And college is a hard environment, right? Like you've got a
Yep.
lot of social distractions outside of running, especially at the Division III level. You had referenced, a guy like Tristan Lucy Spidell, who was kind of one of those first guys to help you really change the culture. When you're only with them from 4 to 6, how important is that to have just kind of that one anchor guy or somebody that starts to lead the way as far as example? Because that's the guy that's with the team for the majority of the hours in their day, right? Like you got a lot of these guys that are living together. And so what were some of the things that you maybe saw in him, or like what did that shift look like where you had somebody taking ownership?
I think the biggest thing is conviction. People don't change overnight, and everyone's going to make mistakes, and there's peer pressure galore on a college campus. And I don't expect anyone to come in and be perfect. I don't expect anyone to walk in. I know they might want something, but they're going to go through trials, they're going to go through hurdles. But the biggest thing to me with him was conviction. He might mess up, he might do a thing here or there that's like, come on, man, you know what we're trying to accomplish here, and it's a little bit frustrating. But he would always walk in and be convicted that, hey, coach, I'm not doing the right thing. What can we do? How can we change this program? And a lot of that revolved around the conversations in the office, not even the 4 to 6 practice time, but the willingness to walk in the middle of the day and just say, hey, coach, I've thought of this. Hey, coach, what can we do to improve this? And wanting to sit down and structure something. And one thing he really brought to my attention is, especially at the collegiate level, where there's so many distractions and there's so many choices in life, is they really needed some concrete black and white in the beginning. They needed some, foundational, like, hey, this is the expectation. This is what needs to be happening. This is what you're committing to. And I think without that, you wouldn't have change. You'd have a whole bunch of individuals that might say they want something, but the moment they walk out of there without a black and white, without some fundamental, I don't like rules, but we needed rules in the beginning a little bit.
Yeah.
Without those, I don't think we could have turned a corner.
Yeah. People operate better with structure in general. And I think that's a desire, is that people actually want structure. And I think that, and it's indicative of, what you've done in the program too. It's like you kind of set these guys on the right trajectory. They started seeing a little bit of success with it. Therefore, they started buying in and they started to trust you. And I think that's where those conversations in the office, they start to happen. It's where you get guys that are walking in, hey, coach, I'm thinking about this. To me, that's a sign of a program really building. I mean, I just think back to our time, and it's like, Coach Bauman, the guy he's now the director of the program up at Moravian, but we just all had a great relationship. You could pop into his office anytime. He was always there to, answer questions, bounce ideas, talk about the workouts. It wasn't, one directional. It was, he wanted our feedback and things like that. So it sounds like that started to develop with maybe first Tristan, but then other guys on your team as well.
Yeah, of course. And, we had some buy-in from some of those juniors and seniors that, after a year, you didn't really necessarily expect some of those to jump ship, but as they start seeing the success of others, they start putting other things off to the side and they really want to invest at a higher level. I think of like Andrew Osborne, who's still in coaching now over at CNU. He really started to pour into it more. Drew Smith, just, people started to transition. And although early days weren't perfect, like I said, there was enough buy-in that we were able to get the ball rolling enough, get the right recruits in. And that year recruiting, it's a challenge when you're recruiting with that culture and that team where it's not where you want it to be. You want to make sure the rounds of recruits that you're getting in now are people that you want in the program, not people that are really being recruited from old culture. And I think that was a little bit of a challenge, but the guys understood that. And I think the guys even saw that in, the way I would sell our program, the way I would share what we were all about. And they knew, it's not going to stay the way it was. We're going to
Yeah.
transition into bigger and bigger things. And we were able to get some recruits in that first cycle that really helped lay a solid foundation with Tristan and just move the program forward to where it is now.
Yeah, I want to come back on the recruiting thing and talk about that a little bit. But you had mentioned something earlier just about, having guys that, the guys aren't going to be perfect. Guys are going to make mistakes and being able to have, grace with guys. And I remember reading an article on, Max Sparks, who, Max won the conference in cross country this year, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, all American track, and just had a phenomenal seasons, running extremely well, set some school records. But he had a little bit of a bumpy road in there, some things that maybe he had messed up on, and I remember reading that article, and I'm like, how many coaches would have just cut this guy loose and not kept him around? Talk about your mindset of just kind of working through some of those things with him, and I loved it because I just it was such a great testament again to just your patience with guys, and then really being able to pull out the best out of somebody.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you have to realize you're dealing with someone's life. It's not just your team, it's not just a sport. And ultimately, what you choose to do in those moments as a coach can have an impact on an individual for the rest of their life. It's not just a moment, or it's not just the next 4 years. It's a mindset and a mentality that you leave them with. And I think it's, fundamentally important as a Christian. Like, we got to have grace. We know we're going to fall short. We know we're going to have hurdles and trials along the way. We're promised that there's suffering, and I share that a lot with Max. And I think the biggest thing kind of goes back to what I shared with Tristan. It's the conviction side. Are we willing to repent? Are we willing to turn away? Are we willing to do the right things? And I can see that in Max's heart, and that's important to me. And we kind of always have a rule: if you do something wrong, there's always a consequence. There's a consequence to your action. But once a part of the family, always a part of the family. We don't just abandon someone because they made a mistake or they did something stupid. We try to learn from it. And those consequences, obviously, they might, miss a meet, they might miss something here or there, they might be removed from the team for a little while. But the whole time in the background, we're trying to build that individual back up. We're not trying to dismantle them. We're not trying to, break them down. We're just trying to kind of have an awakening and have them, turn away and say, hey, no, this is what I really need to be doing. And with Max, we joke around about all the time. I know Max, he's not perfect. There's probably going to be more mistakes made, but I know, hey, he might do something one day, but I can guarantee you he's going to be back in my office the next day because he cares about his boys, he cares about the program, he cares about his family, he cares about his life. And I know ultimately he's going to turn away from what he's done, and he's going to want to go back and make things right. And he's going to work really hard, and he's going to want to make the program better. And that's why it's so easy with athletes like that to, have that grace, because you see what they've done, and if I would have cut Max, the harm that may have happened was nowhere near, what he's produced.
Right.
He's been great, and, I've loved having him.
Yeah. That's such an important message. I mean, you look at today's culture and just, there's the whole term cancel culture, and it's like, somebody does one thing wrong and we want to write them off. And, but it's like, you got to know the heart behind people, right? Yeah, people should be held accountable for their actions, but like you said, it's, what's the consequence of just canceling somebody out versus actually spending the time to build them back up and, help them become a better version of themselves. So that's awesome, man. You talk a lot about your Christian faith, which I love to hear that. But as a coach, is everybody on your team a Christian, or like how do you approach that just in your coaching? Is it hey, I need to share the gospel with everybody, or is it more of just hey, I'm gonna just be an example and live that out?
For sure. I think living it out is the most important thing. And no, I mean, I have no expectation that, even in recruiting, I'm not trying to recruit the perfect Christian kid. I believe Christianity is a faith that's to be lived out and to be shown by action, not just by word. And obviously we instill some of those values in our program with the way our expectations are set. But we're also very accepting of others. And we know that, it's everyone's choice and what to follow. And we're very individualistic. There's a lot of autonomy, and, whether that's training, whether that's, academics, athletics, professionalism, everyone's different. And we know we're going to, go down different paths. But ultimately, yeah, I'm going to share my faith. I'm a Christian. That's what I'm supposed to do. We're supposed to disciple. But at the same time, we don't shove it down people's throats. We're not, sharing Bible verses daily or anything of that nature, but I don't think I need to. I think my life speaks for itself. I think my family speaks for itself, and my athletes know where I stand, and
Yeah.
ultimately they know my expectations of them in terms of just how they live. But ultimately, it's by their own free will and grace that they're going to come to God, and I don't worry about that. I just live my life and try to do the best I can to raise great young men and women to be successful in life, and hopefully through how I live and how they see others live around me and my family, and I hope they see
Yeah.
Christ in me, and that is the goal.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We talked a lot about the men's program here too. Want to make sure we give the women's program some love, but maybe talk about, some of the changes that you've seen on that side of things. I know, you had a individual NCAA qualifier in outdoor track this year, a girl who was, 2 years ago on paper, you would have never predicted that. Your girls, for the first time since 1998, qualify as a team for the NCAA championships in cross country. So there's been a lot of strides there as well. Maybe just talk about that, and then talk about the difference of coaching the men versus coaching the women's team. Are there differences? Is it the same approach?
For sure. And I agree with you. The women don't get enough credit, and I think a lot of that is kind of even the history of the program. You look
Right.
back to your time, you look back to the history of the program overall, and the men, in comparison, have had a lot more success over time. But I also feel like the women have not been as invested into or valued as highly as we have, as we came in. We believe it's one program. The women deserve just as much opportunity. They've had just as much success since we've been here, if not more. But when I came in, our women were kind of in shambles.
Yeah.
We didn't have individuals that we were keying off of for success. The men had, they still had their core unit. They were still in a decent place, and it was even tough for the first few years because even some of our top couple athletes, they were commuter students.
Mm.
Still some of the greatest athletes I've coached to this day. I think of Sammy Schreiber and Morgan Watson, awesome people. Just great to lay a foundation around, but it was also hard to, build a culture around when they're not on campus daily. And we needed those dominoes to fall. And thankfully we had, Nat Deacon come over from soccer. And that was a huge transitional moment for us. I can't think of a more picture perfect student athlete you could ask for than her,
Yeah.
across both sports. And that came with the lifestyle and just the willingness and dedication to invest in a high level and being a student athlete. And when that got modeled, not only for our women, but even our men, things really got rolling. And it took a lot longer to build the women's culture because our numbers were so low on the women's side. But in doing so, you had asked, what's different? What's different from coaching men to women? They're vastly different, but we do believe it's one program. So do we coach them differently? Yeah. Do we coach them at different times? No, we still hold practices together, but the messaging has to be a little bit different. And
Yeah.
what your expectations of them is a little bit different because women's running is a little bit more mental and emotional. It is a little bit more individualistic. It is a little bit more confidence based. And I think in some ways, women's coaching can be a little bit more rewarding. They really trust you. They really value you as a coach. They really hang on your every word. They really want to know, like, hey, how can I do this better? And if you can't get their trust, you can't build a women's program. The women's program revolves around trust and understanding and knowing that you have their best interest in mind. As you know, as a man and being in the program, men want a little bit of autonomy. They're more of a confident, kind of a little bit of an arrogance behind it. Like, I can do this, coach. I got this. I want this. They're a little bit more driven on their own, where women, they just want to know, coach, what do you need me to do?
Yeah.
What's going to make me better? Are you, how much confidence do I have in you? And I think with the women, it took a while to get it rolling because numbers were low. Once we got the numbers up and started to get the right fit in there, this year they absolutely just blew my mind with what they're able to do. I would say as a team, coaching like 10 years now, high school, college level, this team has exceeded my expectations more than any team I've ever coached in the past. And
Wow.
that's not because I didn't think we didn't have talent. It was more of just the cultural shift and mindset and belief and trust and confidence that not only they instilled in me, but their teammates.
Yeah.
And, just making sure that we came to practice with a positive mindset, that, stress didn't build up, that we kept the joy in the sport. And I was just so proud of these women because it was just such a fun year. There wasn't a lot you really had to say. You just had to, line up with the line and say, girls, like, you've done everything you need to. Go have fun, go
Yeah.
enjoy the moment. And I think the less I said, the better they got, the more confident they got in what we were doing from a day-to-day basis. They didn't need the rah-rah. They didn't need to be pumped up. If anything, they just needed to relax and get the job done. And that's what they were doing all year, is just, meet after meet after meet. We just saw it and it was like, wow, these women pull through even when things aren't perfect. They really came up big.
Yeah, that's huge. You said a lot of good stuff in there. And I'm just thinking even on the whole, because I remember we talked about this before too. Like, it's like the sometimes less is more
Yep.
when you're communicating a message. I think about it. I mean, I worked full time in sales, and I can remember an instance of sitting there with another sales guy who he just kept talking and kept talking. I'm like, man, if you would just, stop, like you would close this deal. Like, you don't need to keep on running on and saying more. And it's so true with girls. I mean, I coached at Monticello High School for 4 years, and I remember, I like this topic because I coach boys and girls. I remember going in, I thought for sure I was going to like coaching the boys better. But got in there, started working with these girls. The program was, at a pretty rough spot, similar to what you walked into. And we just started getting some of the right girls in the right positions, girls that liked each other. They were having fun with running. They just enjoyed being out there. But it came down to a lot of times it's just like, hey, you're in shape. You're awesome. Let's go rock and roll. Right. And these girls would go out there and produce. And so, yeah, absolutely. Definitely some differences there. But I think the other thing that you mentioned too is, having, yes, you wanted more numbers, right? Like, you wanted to get more numbers in the program, but also the importance of, it's Jim Collins, good to great, right? Like, you want to put the right people in the right seats. And I think that is so crucial. You mentioned Nat Deacon. She comes in there and just, from a cultural standpoint, a talent standpoint, a work ethic standpoint, like all those foundational pieces, she had it. And then you can start building around that. I mean, that's true whether you're talking about sports, whether you're talking about business, whatever it may be, is just getting a few of those key pieces in place. And so, okay, here's the foundation. Here's somebody that can carry the culture. Here's somebody that's buying in. Here's somebody that's an advocate for what we're doing as coaches. And now we can build around that.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And I think the big thing with Nat is she had that culture in high school, and a lot of people don't, know her background, but like, her high school team was incredible. One of the, fastest 4x8s in, Pennsylvania state history. And Pennsylvania is a
Wow.
huge track state. And a lot of people looked at this girl as someone that just walked off the soccer field and was just a tremendous athlete. I'm like, no, man, she honestly, and Nat would laugh saying this because we talk about it all the time, she was not the most talented athlete. She really wasn't. She just worked really, really hard and lived a great lifestyle to be successful. And she had been around that. She had been around some amazing track athletes. She was a I think she ran 4:59 in high school in the mile, or right at 5 minutes. She had some success. So it was a blessing to inherit someone like that, but it wasn't even the blessing of the performance. It was more of the blessing of, hey, this is how you do it.
Mm.
and being able to talk and mentor athletes. And I don't think she understands how much she really did. It wasn't, she went completely out of her way to do it, just by living that lifestyle and having casual conversations at practice and watching people try to model that and emulate it really was passed down in our program. And when I look at, the people that are in there now, they're still athletes in our program that will run to her door as the assistant soccer coach just to have the conversation. Well, how'd you do it? And I'll send them there. I'm like, hey, why don't you go talk to Nat? Because I know I'm not the solution for everything. I may be your coach, but not everyone can connect on every issue perfectly.
Yeah.
And he's just been, such a critical part of building our women's program, even now. If you look at, Kelsey Lagunas winning the conference title in cross country, I know she had a couple conversations with Nat this fall in her office, just, picking her brain and, trying to figure out, where's this confidence come from? Like, how do you have this belief? How do you have this trust? And, so much with women is wanting to appease people and wanting to make people proud. And sometimes you just got to let that go and run. You just got to have fun and understand that everyone's going to be proud of you just for the effort. And I think that's something, Nat was able to instill and just show her, that was like, hey, like, no one's going to be disappointed in you if you fail. They're going to be disappointed in you if you don't try, if you're not willing to jump off that cliff, like we talked about, and just go for something big. And that was something Nat was always willing to do, and something I think that got passed on. And I think back to this cross country season, there's probably the most historical high school team of all time, Newberry Park boys. Anyone
Yep.
that follows running. And I know their coach got a lot of flack for making the comment that the 420 mile was not that fast for a guy. He was talking about, they were talking about, how do you build a successful program? And he's like, hey, like, people are limiting, their athletes. They're just, 420 is not that fast in the mile. You're like, high school boys mile, that's fast. And a lot of people were offended, but I liked it. That was something I had always taught to our men, even last year. It was like, guys, 15-minute 5K is not that fast. 4-minute 1500 it's not that fast. Women, it's not that fast to run 18 minutes in a 5K. Like, we can all break 5 in the 1500. And when they start believing and having that confidence and having people that really, trust that, the sky's the limit. And I think that's where it kind of started to take off during COVID, was just, that process of understanding that, like, look at what everyone else is doing, and why can't we do that? We're not different.
Yeah.
We're not believing in it. We're not trusting in it, and we're limiting ourselves.
That's huge, man. Just the expectation shift. I watched that with just observing the program as an alumni. And I know you and I talked about this before, but it was like your guys and girls just started seeing themselves differently. And one of the indicators for me was, you had a group of guys during, it was last summer, I believe, that chose to go out to Flagstaff, Arizona for the summer and train out there. And for people listening that aren't as well versed in running, it's like, why would you do that? Well, great running, get to train at altitude a little bit, just get some great summer running. But like, I hadn't really heard of D3 guys making a move like that. Like, that was something that if you were at a high level D1 program, maybe you take the time, go train like that for the summer. But to me, I was like, okay, that the program has turned a corner, because if you have guys making decisions like that, it's clearly they're believing something more about themselves. They're believing something more about the program. And I love what you're talking about here, of just changing your expectation for what's possible. I mean, it's like when Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, it's like, it was just the floodgates opened up of other people breaking 4 minutes because they believed it could be done. Right.
For sure. Yeah. And, you alluded to that flag trip. Andrew Johnson really just grabbed the bulls by the horns that guys were doing this, during COVID, and was like, made everything happen, started to book it out. I have a really good friend that's the assistant coach in Northern Arizona, being in flag and just connecting them with him to, find the good running spots, and just understand altitude training better, and understanding what to do and what not to do while they're out there. And I think they really accomplished it well, because some people go out there and they really don't get the benefits of it. They don't understand it. They don't understand what to do, or, really what is the benefit of being out there. And I told the guys, just go out there and run a lot. You don't have to do anything special. Keep it easy. The body's naturally going to adapt and take care of itself, but go have fun. And, it wasn't anything special. It wasn't, if anything, we spread out the hard workouts. We went to 10-day cycles. We were doing 2 workouts in like 10 days and a long run. And just really trying to build that aerobic base and, let them have fun and enjoy that experience. And not only, yeah, that helped the men a lot make those jumps. And I think during that fall with COVID, it was rough for the women. They didn't have that, cultural connection that the guys had being in flag that summer together and just bringing everyone back together and everyone being really excited for the jumps people had made. But I think the women also looked over and was like, hey, we could do this too. Like, look at the guys' success. They're not doing anything different. Like the training was, primarily the same. We just got to trust each other. We got to trust the program, and we just got to build into it. And I think that kind of carried over to the success of indoor and outdoor for both programs, just keeping the ball rolling and staying positive. I know we had talked a little bit about like the COVID and just depression, and it was just
Yeah.
rampant, and it was miserable for a lot of teams. And you would show up at meets in the winter and spring, and I kind of chuckled to myself because you could see it. You'd see other teams, heads down, and I'd look over at our guys and girls, and we were just having fun.
Mm.
And we had lived that in the fall, and I'm really thankful for an AD like John that he's not asking the questions of what can't we do. He was saying what can we do, and let's do it. And any opportunity, any crack, any door that's open, it's like we're running through it. We're trying to take advantage of every opportunity in the safest way possible to make sure that our athletes could stay motivated and stay positive. And he was a driving force behind that. So I'm really thankful that I was at a university that was proactive during that. And we didn't just shut down and live as hermits in a room. We really tried to get out there and just do everything possible to put our program on the map during that time.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love as we're talking too. I mean, I remember hearing when I was coming up in coaching, I had a guy tell me, because I was getting my master's in exercise physiology, and he's like, it's great to know exercise physiology, but don't become an exercise physiologist. And what he meant by that was in the context of coaching, like don't get so hung up in the science of things that you forget all the other pieces of coaching. And that's why I love our conversation right now, because it's, just in that last couple of minutes, it was the first time you even alluded to anything about the science behind running. It's like everything we've been talking about is more culture, mindset, and not to neglect it. It's still an important piece. But I just, I think a lot of people miss that when they think about coaching. They think about, I gotta get so in the weeds on writing the perfect workout and doing the perfect training cycle and all this stuff. And they forget about the connection with their athletes, which is so apparent, that you guys, the staff at Lynchburg, have been able to figure out.
Yeah, and coaching is an art. We say that like the science behind it's like 50%. Coach Sprecher, when we walked in together, it was awesome to learn from a guy that like knows the science inside and out, and has that background, and you kind of learn the tools of the trade, and you learn the framework to work within. You learn how to use those tools, but then the science or the art comes into play. And as you're coaching, that not every individual is the same, and it's not black and white. Science might say this, but we also remember there's a mental and emotional part to the sport. And as you're using the tools in the toolbox, sometimes you have to break a rule in the framework, and you have to know when you're breaking it. You have to say, hey, like scientifically, physiologically, this may not, produce the best result physically, but mentally and emotionally, we're going to end up getting a way better result that's going to far supersede what the physiological effect is.
Yeah.
And, we weigh that every day. Even when I'm drawing up workout plans, or we're looking at summer training, winter training when they're alone, it's like, well, physiologically, I want them to do this, but I know mentally and emotionally that's going to put them in a terrible place. So why don't we compromise? And why don't we get to here? And we have a lot of individual conversations about that. And, I know we were alluding to Max Sparks earlier. He's probably one of the biggest ones, probably a daily text of just motivation and inspiration, and just, checking in with each other and making sure that what we're doing that day is going to meet the mental and emotional need as well as the physical need, and improvising as needed.
Yeah, that's awesome. I got to be careful because I could go down this rabbit hole and we'd be on here for another 2 hours talking about, mindset around training. I just want to make sure we're respectful of time here, but I want to hit on just real quick, and I'll kind of lump these two questions together, but, thinking about recruiting, number one, kind of your approach to that. But number two, Lynchburg is a Division III program. And I know I remember I even had this thought coming out of high school of, I have to try to go to a D1 school early on. I was thinking that. I was like, everybody wants to go and run D1. I was talking to my cousin over the holidays, and he's got a daughter that's playing, soccer. She's only 14, but it's like already this talk of like every kid thinks they have to go and play Division 1. And, for me, making that decision to go and compete at Division 3 level, I wouldn't change it, one iota. Now, granted, I wasn't good enough to go run at an ACC school or something like that. But if there was a Division 1 program, I could have found a Division 1 program to go and run at for the sake of running Division 1, right?
Yeah.
But talk about maybe just, I know personally the pros of, what I got out of a Division 3 program. But I think sometimes that gets lost for high school kids, and they think that they're missing out completely if they, if they go and run Division 3.
Yeah, for sure. And recruiting, it's evolving even now, with what we're experiencing with COVID and, inflation rates and cost of education. And, I feel like almost every university is, making shifts and mindsets and trying to figure out like what works best. But we've always kind of stuck to our roots. Me and Coach Sprecher talk about it all the time. We're a program of opportunity. We don't believe in playing God. I'm not going to tell someone, oh, I think you can do this and you can do that. And I think the development in our program kind of speaks for itself. You have those success stories time and time again of athletes, going from the 17-minute something 5K guy to breaking into the 14s in a couple years. You start getting that year after year. Girls going from 20 minutes and running 1740s. They see the development. And I've always said, if you want to commit at a high level to being a student athlete, which seems backwards because a lot of people think, oh, that's a D1 mindset, come to Lynchburg. And they're like, wait, I'm being recruited by the Division 3 school. What's going on here? And the reality to me, we always say the Division 1 experience with the Division 3 individuality. Knowing that, hey, we're a small community, everyone's going to know you, everyone cares about you, everyone's going to invest in you at a high level. You're not treated, differently. Like sometimes you are at a D1 school where, they have the major football program or basketball program and cross country track's an afterthought. Lacrosse, soccer, track, softball, we're all treated as equal. We all care about each other. We all support each other. And Lynchburg's a family. And, knowing that, I'm like, hey, you guys can have the Division 1 experience. Me and Coach Sprecher are going to treat you and train you just like any other Division 1 coach would around the country. But you're going to get the Division 3 investment where everyone cares about you as an individual and wants you to succeed in every aspect of life, being a student athlete, the professional life, even after you graduate, and making sure that you're taken care of. And I think that's very important to me. I always say, like, don't come to Lynchburg. A lot of D3 programs sell themselves as all have the well-rounded experience and getting involved in a lot of other things. And they turn the athletics into a club. I'm like, come here if you want to win championships and you want to get better and you want to develop. But remember, everyone in the community cares about you as more than a runner. We're going to make sure that academics is taken care of. We're going to make sure that, life's taken care of and that stresses remain manageable. And we're going to talk daily. We don't have the D1 athletic bureaucracy of you have to perform now, you have to do this. That pressure's off. You're kind of free to develop at your own rate and have fun and enjoy the experience, knowing that you got coaches that really care about you and want what's best for you.
That's huge. Yeah. Awesome, man. I know I remember even, when I was at Lynchburg too, like you said, it's a Division 1 experience. And like, I think, cross country and track are unique sports too, because you still go to the same meets with a lot of these D1 schools. Like you're still competing against the same guys. I mean, some of my best times came running down at Duke or University of Richmond, or, remember had a great race up at Bucknell. It's like you're racing D1 guys almost every weekend. And so the competition is there. The opportunities are there. And, yeah, I mean, some of my best, just like travel experiences came from being a part of a Division 3 team, getting to go and run at nationals and travel all over the country and race. And so, like you said, man, the opportunities are there.
Yeah, and I think, I'm glad you brought that up because our sport doesn't know division. You're going to run all levels of competition throughout the year. The only time it knows division is, your regional or national championships. And I kind of laugh when I say that because if you look at the athletes that compete at a Division 1 regional or national championship, the percentage is so few.
Yep.
And you look at the experiences that kids leave on the table. We'll go to all the same meets those big Division I schools go to throughout throughout our track season. We'll compete against them, give them the best opportunities. And then come regionals and nationals, they're competing to be an All-American. They're competing to win a national championship. Whereas a lot of their Division I, friends that, oh, I'm running here, I'm running at UNC, I'm running at UVA, I'm running here. They might be sitting at home come that regional and national championship because they can't perform at that level.
Right.
And they're watching their peers that, they may have, beaten handedly in high school, become All-Americans or compete for national titles, run faster times than them 2 or 3 years later. And they're kind of forgotten as like the 10th runner on a Division I school, or even on a mid-major that doesn't even take their team to regionals or never makes nationals or doesn't contend for conference titles.
Yeah.
And I'm like, our kids are getting by far a better experience than the majority of Division I, athletes out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it comes down to the individual. I think, you just have to, as an individual, know what type of experience you're looking for, what you want out of your college experience. But you're right. I mean, I was able to serve 1 year as the grad assistant when I was in grad school at UVA, and you would see it, right? Like you'd see kids that would come in and they were studs in high school, but then they would just kind of get, lost in the shuffle. And you'd have kids that would leave the program after a year or 2 years because they were burnt out, and it was just maybe not the experience that they thought. And so I think it's just, the reason I bring this up, and I like this topic too, is just, for high school kids or even parents that are talking to their kids, right, is really think about what you want out of that experience. And I think the value is, I still thank my dad for it, but I remember the only reason I even looked at Lynchburg was I was going to check out UNC and Wake Forest on a spring break to tour the campuses. This was my junior year of high school. And my dad said, he's like, why don't we stop down at Lynchburg? He's like, I know Dr. Tom's, and it might be worth talking to him just to get a different perspective. And me, I was just like, yeah, sure. Like, what's the harm in that? And just going and having that meeting, having him walk me around campus and talk about the program, I was like, okay, wow, like this is actually, like, I actually really like this. And I think a lot of kids just, they don't know, like, you don't know what you don't know. Like, I think they don't realize what opportunities are there at a Division III program or how awesome that experience can be.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, you said something, Division I coaches, it's not, a lot of times it's not even their fault. That's the bureaucracy of Division I athletics. You got to invest heavily in your top guys. You got to invest heavily in the team to get them to a certain level, because your job's on the line too, and they got to perform. And a lot of athletes don't understand that, and they get into this cycle where, oh, I got a Division I scholarship, I got 10%, I got 20%, 30%. And they don't even realize that some of these private schools, it's not even that much more expensive at the end of the day once you get your packages out of the cost of attendance. And they don't weigh those options. They don't think of it. They start looking at sticker prices. They start hearing scholarship, and they get carried off, and they don't even give Division III a year. They don't understand what's out there for them. And I would just encourage any high school athletes or parents that are listening, like, dig into it. Don't look at just the sticker price of things. Don't just look at the base value. Don't look at the gear. Don't get caught up in that stuff, and understand that at the end of the day, 15 years down the road, you're going to be looking back at an experience that happens once in a lifetime for 4 years, and how much joy and how much friendships and networking came from those 4 years versus how much of it was a grind, and how much demand and how much expectation. And I just love the D3 setting and what we're able to bring, and just that opportunity. I think it just creates such a more joyful attitude when there's not that pressure, and it is just opportunity.
Yeah, 100%. I'll say this. You talked about sticker price. I remember when I was looking at, I had narrowed down my choices to Lynchburg and William and Mary. And if I went to William and Mary, I was going to I'll just go run club. But I remember from a price tag standpoint, Lynchburg, after like financial aid, scholarship stuff, actually ended up being cheaper than what I was going to pay going to a public in-state school of William and Mary,
Yeah.
And so I think you're exactly right. I think, just digging into that a little bit deeper is so important. One last question I'll ask you, Jake. We'll kind of wrap this thing up here too, but just, when you think about the program moving forward, what are you excited about? What do you see for you guys coming up? You got indoor, outdoor season coming up. What's kind of your maybe your long-term vision for the program?
Yeah, I mean, we're in a great spot right now. I know a lot of people look at our success in cross country and, we're like, oh, wow, that was an awesome season. But, if I'm completely transparent and honest, we were a little bit bummed out on the men's side. Women's side, obviously, we're through the roof. Like I had alluded to, they killed it like every meet. And just getting to nationals was a massive accomplishment for them. But the men, we just had some pieces that just, kind of fell apart, whether that was a physical injury or stress levels or just things that just didn't come together right. And I think part of that, you look back and, a lot of that's on me. A lot of it's managing a certain situation or different scenarios differently. And how could we have done things differently? And I think we easily could have been a top 10 team in the country. But that doesn't mean moving forward that we view it as like, oh, we were 18th. No, I mean, we didn't lose anything. We got the same guys coming back. We got the same guys coming back next fall. We're basically going to be returning everyone. Women are going to be returning everyone except Steph. And, Steph's had a absolutely amazing career. But when I look forward, I don't sugarcoat it. I want to win a national title. I want to chase that. I want to be a podium team, and having all those pieces back and knowing what those guys can do, and knowing what our program, the development rate that we've been able to have with all our athletes. And now from a recruiting perspective, our recruits coming in are just a little bit more higher caliber every year. I think this season is going to be special. I think of Sam Lenenza, Max Sparks, Frank Casorba, three of the best, probably Division III runners in the country. And I think you're going to see guys step in like Tor Davidson, who a lot of them don't know, or Corbin Green, guys that are coming down the pipeline that I know with just one great off season, they're going to be right there with them. And I think we're going to start not only just having 5 or 6 guys or 4 or 5 girls at kind of that national level. We're going to just get deeper and deeper. And my goal for this program is to become the Johns Hopkins, the North Centrals, the Emorys, the people that are the staples at the top, and not let this thing go. Lynchburg has what we need. And I know they're willing to support it at that level. And I'm thankful to be here because I know with a community like, University of Lynchburg provides, from our president to our AD to Coach Sprecher as the director of track and field, I know our distance program is going to get all the support it needs to be a top 10 team in the country. And I'm really thankful for that.
It's awesome, man. Gets me fired up as an alumni hearing you say that stuff, talking about winning a national title. And, I hope people listening, whatever their background is, will just, realize to set your expectations for what you're capable of higher and go after. And that's clearly what you guys have been able to do. Love the conversation around culture. Hopefully people listening didn't think this was a podcast to try to sell them on Lynchburg. Obviously we both very passionate about it, but I've just been able to watch the program, as a fan, as an alumni, and I've watched the growth that you guys have had. And I knew that there would be a lot of great just lessons and mindset out of this conversation that, whether you're a runner, whether you're an athlete of a different sport, whether you're a parent or a business owner or whatever endeavor you're pursuing, I think a lot of these things are applicable that you can apply into your own life. And so, man, really, really enjoyed this conversation. I could have talked with you for another couple hours on this stuff for sure.
For sure.
Maybe we'll have to do another one, but really, really appreciate you getting on here, Jake. And, definitely wishing the program the best of luck moving forward.
Yeah, we appreciate it. We appreciate the support of all the alums out there. I think your generation has, really come back out and really started to support the program at a high level. And I love connecting with alums at the coaching convention we just came back from in Orlando, and just seeing the passion and support for Lynchburg. It's amazing. And I'm just thankful to be able to lead it now and hopefully make everyone proud.
Yeah, well, you're doing that, man. Really appreciate it, and appreciate Coach Sprecher, the rest of the staff, and all the guys and girls that are making this thing happen. So,
yeah, thank you. Have a good one, man.
Awesome, man. Thanks, Jake. Take care.
Yep.